press record now. If you accept the recording, that would be great. And there may be a few people joining us in the background. People usually run a few minutes late, especially when it's in the evening. But thanks so much, everybody, for giving up your evening today to spend it with me for the next hour on our webinar. So we'll make a start, and I will keep an eye on the waiting room and let people in. But let's make a start. So this evening, we're going to talk about practice growth, and in particular, how we can kickstart growth in 2023. We're looking specifically through the lens of the patient consult. So how can we do that? By transforming the patient consultations. So that's our agenda this evening. So my intention for the webinar this evening, we're going to cover quite a bit of content in the next hour or so. So what I'd really like to kind of help you to gain some insights with this evening is just start to think about, as we work through the content, there'll be things that we cover that I think probably will be familiar to you, and there'll be things that we cover that might be new. So what I'm hoping is that you'll just start to get some new insights, some kind of new perspectives on perhaps some of the working practices that you have today, and hopefully they'll start to add value. My intention is that you'll get something that you'll be able to use straight away in practice tomorrow if you're working tomorrow. So that's the intention. And so our outcomes this evening, it's about kickstarting growth by, as I said, specifically thinking about how we transform the patient consultation. And we'll look at some principles and practices that help us to better understand patients' needs. We'll look at a specific communication system that we use that was published in the book Inspire, Consult, Sell. I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through it, but it really does help to ensure more positive consultations, deeper connection with the patient, more effective communication that makes you feel more relevant and valuable when you're in consults with patients. And finally, we'll then look at a principle for asking for commitment from patients and why that's important to help the patient to get the results they're looking for. So, and we'll take Q&A at the end. So we'll finish at about 5 to 8 and open up to questions at that point. So many of you, thanks again for joining this evening. Many of you will know me through either the contact that we have through either social media, or you may have worked with me in the past. Some of you may not be as familiar with the work that I've done, but just to give you a bit of history, because not everybody knows my backstory, and I'll do this briefly, by the way, but about 32 years ago, I started my career as a dental technician. So my original career started in dentistry, and I qualified as a technician, and then realized shortly after that actually, working in the laboratory was probably not the long-term career for me. And I then moved into sales, in dental sales. So I spent about 5 years working for a couple of different companies in dental sales, way before the internet and mobile phones and all that modern technology. It was quite an interesting period of time. And then in around 1999, I joined 3M. And it was then that I really started to get some strong development in place. I was moved out of the dental business at that point and moved into medical. I became a sales manager shortly for about 3 years. Then shortly after that, I moved into different businesses for 3M as a business manager, and had quite an interesting career inside and outside of dentistry with 3M, and which led to me leading one of their largest businesses as their general sales and marketing manager back in 2017. And then I realized that I was ready for a change, and I left the corporate world, set up my own business. This is Focus for Growth. So we've been going just coming up on 5 years now. And I retrained as an executive coach and started to work with clients privately. And what started out as a coaching business really has developed into a program-based business where we run specific tailored programs for our clients. And we've been doing that, as I say, for the last 4 or 5 years. And in the last 12 months, really started to think about open programs for dentists in particular. So really specializing back into the dental market, but open programs where we can invite dentists to join their colleagues, build a community, really start to think about how we can give wider access to some of these professional development programs that we've developed. And really what we do is think about, I think about this through the lens of my own career, where I've had, some really successful periods, and then I've had some periods where perhaps my performance or my team's performance has gone off the boil. And it's And actually, it very often comes back to fundamentals. And sometimes we can feel like our results are a little inconsistent, like our approach is a little inconsistent. And the best way to kind of address that really is to start to think about how we get back to, higher performance, focus on results, engaging ourselves, our teams and our customers and patients, and then really starting to think about how do we take a more consistent approach to that communication and to the way in which that we're dealing with our customers, patients, and our teams if we're in leadership positions as well. And so the programs we deliver really start to try and address those core issues. And in the background, a lot of the work that I've done, delighted in my corporate career to have been recognised, and more recently in the last couple of years, we've been recognised in Focused Growth as a team by the SME Awards, the Small and Medium Enterprise Awards, where we won multiple awards, and we were submitted to the finals at the end of last year as well. So some great recognition for the work we've done in our business. And I'm proud to have authored 2 books. The first was this book, Inspire and Influence Sell, was the first book. That was back in November 2020. That became an Amazon bestseller. And because I've got a lot of contacts in dentistry, a lot of dentists read that book. And I had a number of inquiries from dentists about whether or not there was a specific book tailored to the dental practice. And so, of course, I wrote Inspire, Consult, Sell, which was published last year. And that also became a dentistry bestseller. Amazon have a dentistry category, and it became a bestseller in the Amazon category as well. And it's been very well received by people. And if you're on the call and you've read the book, I'd love to hear some feedback from you as well. So that's a bit about me. Let's talk about you. So I have a couple of polls that I've created for this evening. So I'd love to know which of these best describes your role. So I've just put a poll up for you. Are you a practice owner? Are you a practice leader or a practice manager? Are you a partner in a practice? Are you a business manager? Would you consider yourself more a business manager in dentistry? Are you an associate? Are you a TCO, or is there another role? If you're another role, just put a note in the chat, and I'll give you a call out. So I'd love to hear your experiences. I'm just going to give that a couple of minutes because you're all filling those in. Thank you so much for filling those in as well. Appreciate that. So poll on the screen. There are a few people just joining us actually who are in the waiting room. So there's a poll on your screen. I'll just give you a moment to orientate yourself to that. We're just asking which of these best describes your role, either in the practice or the business that you're managing. So practice owner, practice leader or manager, partner, business manager, associate, or other. And if there is another, and you're happy to share it, please pop it in the chat, and we'll have a look at that. So I have got a note in the chat. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, excellent. So let me just end that poll, and I'll share the results with you so that you can see them. So Nairi, thank you, Chief Clinical Officer. Thank you, Nairi. Appreciate that. So what have we got? We've got 40% of people joining us this evening are practice owners, 20% are partners, 30% are associates, and then we've got Nairi, our Chief Clinical Officer as well. So thank you all so much for joining me this evening. That's great. We've got a really good mixture of experience and roles in our audience this evening. So second question, I'm going to do 2 in a row if you don't mind. The next question is about the biggest challenge you face when you think about patient consultations, and if you're not in a patient-facing role, perhaps think about this with regard to your teams and what you see them as having challenges with their own patient consultations. So there are 5 choices. Let me just launch that poll for you. So we've got 5 options, and these are the 5 predominant themes that come up in the work we do with clients. So is it discussing prices for treatment options? Is it asking for commitment to start treatment? Is it articulating the benefits of treatment specifically with your practice? Because that tends to be the key differentiator for a patient. Is it asking the right questions, or is it creating the best possible patient experience? So one of those will be the predominant theme for you in your practice, whichever one is the kind of highest priority or the most common challenge that you're seeing within your practice. Just select that one. That'd be great. So I'll just give you a moment to click on the right answer, or the answer that's most relevant for you. I'll just give you a moment to finish that. Thank you everybody who's voting. I appreciate it. That's great. Excellent engagement this evening. Thank you so much. It is the end of a long day in our first week back as well. I do appreciate that. So thank you for making the commitment to join us and to be engaged. Thank you. I do appreciate it. Okay. Thanks so much for your answers. I'm going to end that poll there. I'll just share those results with you. So what have we got? Number one is discussing price for treatment options. That's interesting. So that's the predominant kind of priority or challenge. The next three are split actually in the same order. So the next three are together. We've got asking for commitment, we've got articulating benefits of treatment, and we've got asking the right questions. So those three come in as kind of joint second. Great, thank you. And then finally, we've got creating the best possible patient experience. So interesting results. Thank you all so much. That's great. So let me show you what comes up when we run these polls regularly with our own clients and in webinars like this. The top three tend to be in this order. So the first is asking for commitment to start treatment. The second is asking the right questions. And the third comes up as articulating benefits of treatment with our practice. So they're the three kind of key themes that we're going to discuss this evening because they tend to come up predominantly for us and our client work. And there's some good alignment with the challenges that you're facing in your own practices this evening as well. And this is the order in which they come up. So 20% asking for commitment, 18% asking the right questions, 15% articulating the benefits of treatment. So good alignment with this evening. We also have this platform that we use in Focus for Growth. It's called the Patient Experience Scorecard. And it's a diagnostic platform that we find really useful to work with clients on. And effectively what it is, it's 36 assessment statements. We invite customers to work through the assessment statements, score themselves. And through that process of scoring themselves, they then get a personal development report that starts to share with them some key areas where they could focus and gain some improvement, which will help them in practice, and particularly with patient consultations. And interestingly, a lot of the themes that come out of the patient experience scorecard, the data that we collect is quite interesting. We've had way over kind of 1,000 people go through our scorecard now. And I'll share with you a few areas from the scorecard that we regularly update, which is quite interesting. We have this statement that says, as a practice team, we need to revisit our patients' experience. And interestingly, 75% of people either agree or strongly agree with that statement, which is quite interesting. And you would expect, high growth, positive intention around trying to revisit and continually improve that patient's experience. But this is a revisit, so there is it's an interesting dynamic. The next question that's interesting on our scorecard is about asking high quality questions that elicit the patient's greatest needs and priorities. And between agree and strongly agree, that 52% is quite a split. That half of the people taking our scorecard confident, the other half not confident that they're asking the highest quality questions of the patient. And we'll talk about this in a bit more detail as we go through tonight's webinar. This really is quite, this is a linchpin for ensuring that you get, the highest relevance and value for patients is the questions that we ask and the way we engage patients. The third area that's interesting, and again links with our content this evening, I can articulate the benefits to the patient of treatment options our practice provides. 66% agreeing or strongly agreeing, and 34% either not agreeing or neutral on the subject, which we take as disagreement in this kind of context. And what's interesting is that as dental teams, we tend to be quite confident around the technicalities, explaining treatment options. But until we understand the patient's needs, sometimes that explanation of the treatment option can feel a bit disconnected for the patient. We have to make sure that we understand the patient's needs in advance of explaining treatment options. And then the final point, which is also interesting, is this: I'm confident to ask for patients' commitment to treatment every time. And about 51% of people saying they either agree or strongly agree with that statement. So thereby, again, almost a 50-50 split, with some people saying, yes, I can ask for commitment, other people not able to or not feeling that confidence to ask for commitment. So we'll talk about how we can address each of these this evening. Now, before we go into addressing them, actually it's really important because sometimes we jump straight to solutions. If we don't understand the problem well enough, we can fall into the trap of fixing something that actually isn't the real issue. And I'll talk about that as we go through this. So we're going to talk about the challenges, and you'll notice I've reordered them. And I've reordered them intentionally because of the way that they then should be addressed as we go through, the consultation process with the patient. The first thing we should be looking at is how we address and ask the right questions of the patient to truly understand what they need. The second thing then, once we've understood the patient's needs, we should then start to think about how do we most effectively articulate the benefits of treatment with our practice, specifically for our practice, rather than the generic benefits of that treatment. And then thirdly, how do we ask for commitment in a way that is natural, authentic, and we feel confident doing it, and that the patient feels confident and comfortable when we go through that process. So we'll talk about the challenges, then we'll talk about how to address them. So the first challenge is around asking the right questions so that we understand the patient's needs. That's the reason we ask the right questions. And many dental teams that we work with feel this pressure to have a lot of answers, to know the technicalities, and to direct the patient consultation. And it's absolutely right that they should do that. But what happens then is that there's this kind of blind spot around asking the patient the highest quality questions. And if patients don't get the chance to explain what they're thinking and what's most important to them, then in that consultation, they won't feel truly listened to or understood. And that's really important because it's part of the influencing process. We'll talk about that as we look at the patient journey shortly. And then finally, if we're not taking the time to ask the right questions and listen, then when we present treatment to the patient, it doesn't seem as tailored and as relevant. So the questioning, the lack of questioning, or the result of not questioning actually starts to affect the way that we present treatment options. The two are totally linked. And really, we do have to get into this mindset around how we ask the right questions. I'll talk about how we do this shortly. Asking the right questions, because that then helps it's almost half the solution to the problem that the patient has. Just them being able to articulate it, giving them the time and space to think about what it is they're really looking for, and to explain that, and then have a conversation following that after they've explained their needs. So once we understand the patient's needs, the second challenge then is about articulating the benefits of treatment, specifically with us. And in particular, something that comes up is from a lot of the clients that we work with, without sounding as if I'm trying to sell the patient something. I don't want it to sound like a sales pitch, and that's really important. And often that happens when we haven't truly understood the patient's needs. So it does connect with this previous stage. But a lot of differentiation. How do we differentiate ourselves through treatment options without feeling like we're selling? It can be quite a difficult path to navigate. And if we don't understand how to do it effectively, what happens is we tend to talk about treatment features, the features of what's going on, the technicalities of what's happening, the process, and without having taken the time to ask the right questions. What we found with our clients is that patients then tend to have this focus on price, and they have a focus on price because they don't understand the value that's being kind of delivered through the process. And it also because they're not getting that tailored message that links to something they've told the clinician that they need. And so then, of course, when we start to have the conversation about price with the patient and discussing treatment fees, it becomes uncomfortable. And when we're uncomfortable, we project that onto patients or to other people or to customers. And so then that discomfort turns into hesitance. And normally patients will then say, well, let me think about it. And not all of the patients return. When somebody says, I need to think about it, that's code for I'm not really understanding the value. And so we have to really try and kind of understand how do we address the root cause of that, which is actually questioning and then articulating the benefits of treatment, which we'll go to shortly. And I really like this chart because it kind of cuts through all the noise. We have a lot of things that we think are important when we're trying to explain something to somebody else. And very often, what interests them is not the same as what we think is important. And our job is to really try and understand the two dynamics of that consultation so that we can focus on what's most relevant, the things that we believe are important and the patient needs to be told, and actually what's interesting, compelling, and desirable for the patient. And if we can get that kind of overlap together, if we can find that sweet spot in that area, it really does make a difference to the impact that we make on the patient in the consultation. And then the third challenge is about asking for commitment to start treatment. And what we've found is that even when patients have a clear desire for treatment, if their needs aren't clarified and if the treatment isn't presented in a way that's relevant to them, then patients tend to resist. They tend to be resistant because they don't understand whether or not the treatment's going to fully meet their needs. And we've experienced, and I'm not just we've experienced, I've experienced this personally throughout my career, that sometimes we can overpitch or overtalk treatments or solutions. And if we don't truly understand the other person, the patient, then we feel less confident to ask for commitment once we've done that pitch. We tend to do the pitch and then kind of say something along the lines of, well, I'll let you think about it. And that really is because we don't feel confident that we've done a good enough job in that conversation with the patient. And so, of course, patients don't then commit because they're left feeling uncertain. And if we're uncertain, we project that they become uncertain. So all of these three key challenges are actually interconnected. And of course, when it comes to asking for commitment, if we do back away from asking for commitment, then of course, by not asking, the answer is always, by default, the answer is always no. So actually finding a way to ask for commitment each time that feels natural is really kind of can be really transformational for us in our consultations. And of course, consequence of all of these things together is that treatment acceptance rates are lower, or they're inconsistent. Our recommendations don't feel as compelling to the patient, and that kind of reduces our potential. And so over time, what we've seen, what I've experienced personally as well, is that we kind of lose confidence to communicate with patients. We feel a bit more hesitant. The patient senses that hesitance. We then struggle to ask for commitment, and growing either the focused treatments that we want to grow in the practice becomes difficult. Whether it's growing our private patient list, whether it's focusing on specific elements like maybe Invisalign or cosmetic treatments, then unless we're able to take a structured approach to that consultation, it becomes difficult to get the growth we're looking for. And then at worst, we can feel stuck in reactive dentistry. We can find that consults feel functional, not transformational. And for a lot of patients, they really are looking for a transformation in dentistry. And patients can start to feel indifferent about treatment with us. A satisfaction for patients is okay, but practice revenue doesn't really get the growth that we've got the opportunity to truly explore within our practices. So that's what we see happening. So what we have to do then is start to think about changing the way we look at things, so that what happens then in practice changes as a result. So we know that communication is important. It's so important that the GDC put it as principle number 2. And I know you all know this, communicating effectively with patients. But this is about giving patients the information they need in a way they can understand, so that they can make informed decisions. And remember, that includes all options of dentistry that we're able to provide to them. So it's our responsibility to be able to communicate as effectively as possible with patients. And if we think about this in terms of the patient's perspective, so if we think about the journey that the patient goes through, very often you'll see in a lot of kind of diagrams around process and coaching. They talk about the kind of journey that the patient goes on. They normally talk about funnel, and they talk about bringing people through the funnel. Well, interestingly, we at Focus Growth, one of the things we do is we reverse the funnel, and we think about the journey going from bottom to top rather than top to bottom. Just because if we think about it from top to bottom, we tend to make this assumption that gravity acts with us, and that the patient kind of naturally comes through that decision-making process. And actually, in reality, that isn't true. We have to draw people up through conversations, through that process, so that they are inspired to follow us. And I'll talk about how that works alongside our kind of consultation process. So the patient starts very often with us unaware of the true potential, the true opportunity, the true transformation that we're able to provide. And our job is to make sure that we're well prepared. So we start with preparation. We make sure that we understand the treatment options ourselves. We make sure that we understand the right questions to ask. We make sure that we have a structure that we're following to give us consistency in the approach that we take. And through that preparation, we're then able to have a conversation with the patient that moves them from unaware to attentive to either a situation, maybe a problem, or maybe an opportunity for them. And when the patient's attentive, in that first early stage where the patient, wants to know more, our job is to just share some early insights, about the treatment, maybe some insights about trends, maybe some insights about how the treatment works, but just early insights so that the patient starts to think beyond attentive to being interested. And this is the journey that the patient kind of needs guiding through. So they go from attentive to interested. And at the point when the patient is interested, that's when we have to ask them about their needs. So we have to ask them the right questions. We have to help them to start to shape their thinking, start to clarify what it is they're really looking to achieve from treatment, start to think about some of the reservations they might have. And some of these are unconscious, so they won't have thought them through themselves until we ask the right questions. And as we ask the right questions of the patient, they start to guide themselves then from interested as part of their own journey to creating a desire for treatment. And when they're at a point where they've actually got some desire for treatment, that's the point at which we should start to talk about a solution, and not before. Because if we start to talk about solutions too early in the conversation with the patient and they're only attentive, then what happens is the mind tends to tune out. It just turns off until we've had the chance to articulate what it is we're looking for. Patients need to have that opportunity to articulate what they're looking for. And so when they're in a state of desire, we can talk about a solution, and it is, as you would expect, a two-way conversation with the patient where they're giving feedback as we discuss that solution. And then they'll naturally come to the point where they will want to take action. And when the patient's in a position where they want to now take action because they're motivated and they've been guided through this consultation themselves, that's when we should make a proposal. This is what the treatment plan looks like. Here's a proposal. Here's the pricing. Here's how we would recommend we go further from here. But we shouldn't do that until the patient kind of signals that they're ready to take action. And that's the key distinction. It really is important that we understand that journey and the kind of cues from the patient as they're going through each of the steps. And at that point, of course, they're ready then to start treatment. And what we would do, or what we recommend at that point, is to initiate some form of action from there. So when the patient says, yes, I'm interested in treatment, I'd like to start, then we initiate action. And that, as a process, really does help us to follow the journey the patient goes on and use a structure that is incredibly effective at helping patients to make the right decisions. But of course, long term, we really want loyal patients that choose us, choose the practice, choose our team. And we do that through a process of reflection and ongoing improvement through that consultation process and the patient journey. And what we find is that this is the ideal journey that we want the patient to go on, and how and the way that we would match that through our consultation process. What we find usually happens is far too little preparation done in advance, and actually people find that they don't have the space in their working day to do that preparation on a regular basis. They'll do a good introduction. They tend to ask limited questions of the patient, really trying to solve a problem, and then they find themselves feeling as if they're pitching, which doesn't feel comfortable for them, and it's not comfortable for the patient. They're then met with indecision. And until they change something, they kind of tend to find they're repeating this cycle that's not as effective as they would like it to be. So we use this process. I talked about the structure of the Inspire process alongside the patient journey. We use this cycle we call Inspire, and it really is a cycle. So we talk about how to connect with patients first, so build a connection, strengthen the relationship, because we need to create a relationship before we can really be effective in consultations. Make sure that we've done the preparation necessary to be able to have all of the information at hand, so that when we're having this consultation with the patient, we understand that we're going to give consistent advice and guidance. Start with insight, as you saw from the patient journey, then talk about the patient's needs and ask good questions and listen carefully, then talk about a solution and have that as a discussion. Then we'd make a proposal, and the idea is to get agreement on the proposal. And you'll see that these three stages have multi-directional arrows. So what we recommend is, if we get to a proposal and the patient seems hesitant, then we just work back and check on their needs. So just check that we've uncovered all of the needs, the relevant needs for that patient. And then finally, we would look at initiating some form of action, whether that's a deposit, whether that's booking the next appointment, whether it might be handing over to a member of the team. It may be, if the patient does want to think about it, just making sure that we have a diarised follow-up with the patient so that they can tell us of the decision they've made, so that we're not leaving that open-ended. And then finally, we use this process of reflection. It's a self-coaching process so that we continually evolve and improve the approach that we take to our consults. And we found that's an incredibly effective method for improving consultations. So one of the lessons I learned in my career that's been really valuable for me is thinking from a sales perspective and from a leadership perspective, that when we're trying to share information with people, when we're trying to influence anybody, that actually that influence and commitment is always has to be pulled from people. It's really difficult to push commitment onto anybody. And that's the same if we're leading teams and coaching for commitment. It's the same if we are consulting with patients and asking and questioning and basically pulling from the patient information we need so that we can understand, one, if it's relevant, and then once we've understood whether it's relevant, we can then start to match what we offer with what the patient's looking for and what they need. It's really, really important that we get that distinction. So I share that as a kind of principle for you this evening. So let's look at the three key areas and how we address them. So asking the right questions. So in our process, this is the needs discovery stage. This is how we address the questioning area from needs discovery. And we normally would go into these topics in depth, but I'm going to hopefully share some insights with you that will really help this evening as you start to think about your own consultations. So this needs discovery stage, really important because we've already talked about the patient having the opportunity to articulate what's happening for them. We really do need to slow down, allow the patient to open up. And our job in this stage of the process, and actually throughout the consultation, is really to seek to understand the patient. And everything we need in order to serve the patient actually exists in their mind, in their head. And the only way we can get that out is to ask really good questions, to listen carefully and let them have the space to explain it. Really important that we do that. And one of the ways we talk about listening as a skill. So listening is an interesting skill that it isn't often taught, but should be taught, because what we find is that it's an unnatural thing to do. Actually, listening is less natural for us than talking. So reminding ourselves to listen is really important. And the best way I've found to remind myself is to remember that listen and silent are made up of the same letters, and you can't truly do one without the other. So we really do have to cultivate some silence as part of our listening skills and the space we create for patients to explain what they're looking to achieve. And in terms of the questions that we ask, so listening is important. There's no point asking questions if we don't listen. And as obvious as that sounds, we've all met people where they'll ask questions and don't listen. And that's really important that we get those two things connected. But we also need to consider the types of questions that we ask. And there are three different types of questions, and knowing when to use those questions. And the three different types of questions are open questions that allow people to talk, that preempt people talking because of the structure of the question. And then we've got probing questions where we just want to go a bit deeper into a topic with a patient or a customer and really understand them more deeply. And then we have closed questions, which are questions that just allow us to gain commitment and move them, from a position of understanding through to commitment. And that really is kind of answered yes or no in that context. And knowing when and where we use them is really useful. So if you think back to the patient journey that we discussed a moment ago, where we should be asking the different types of questions. Early on in the consultation, we should be asking open questions, give the patient the opportunity to expand, explain what they're thinking, and articulate their thoughts and start to structure their thoughts for themselves. After we've asked the open questions, as we then start to understand the patient's needs more in depth, we start to probe. So the patients may not give us all of the information they need, so we just ask probing questions that help them to go deeper into their own needs and desires for treatment. And then as they go through the consultation and we've explained the treatment options, then we'd start to ask closed questions towards the end to give the patient the opportunity to make commitment. So that structure, where we use questions and whereabouts in the consultation can be really important. I will, by the way, I'm happy to share the slides with you after today's webinar. So I will send these on to you afterwards as a follow-up tomorrow. So then the second area is around how we articulate benefits of treatment to patients. And so for our process, from a process perspective, we're at the kind of solutions discussion stage. And remember, this should be a discussion, not us presenting or pitching, because that way we allow the patient to give us feedback as we discuss it. And I kind of tend to have this as a bit of a drumbeat in a lot of my communication, that we have to remember we understand the patient's needs before we discuss a treatment solution, because that allows us to match the treatment solution to the patient's needs. Without understanding their needs, we have nothing to match together with. And we have to understand, if patients can't understand the value that we present, then cost always tends to be a greater priority. It's only when we understand value that we tend to focus less on the cost. We really do want to help the patient to understand the value personally to them of treatment with us. And what it means for patients, if you think about, there are three components to the way that we position treatment. And I already started to talk about technicalities, but features, technicalities of the treatment, the process, the science, the laboratory, all of those kind of elements are features, and they tend to be trivial for patients. They don't have the importance that we think they might have. When we start to then talk about advantages, so what's the advantage of one type of treatment or that feature of treatment over another, or over another option that they might have, then that starts to become more compelling. So the advantage of one over the other is important as a distinction for patients. And then the third component or element is the benefit. So what does it mean for the patient? Why is it best for that patient? And when we start to think about presented treatment options in these three elements, so the feature of what the patient gets or what the treatment offers, the advantage that gives to the patient over other options, and then the benefit that specifically has for the patient based on what they told us they need, then treatment solutions are much more compelling, much more relevant when they're positioned in that way. And this is it's a really easy stage of the process, a really easy principle to overlook. But once you start to think about it in these three categories, it just makes the conversation with the patient much more compelling for you presenting it and for the patient as they discuss it with you. So articulating benefits of treatment and distinguishing the difference between them. Thank you. I've got some comments coming in. Thank you very much. That's great. Then the third element is asking for commitment. So proposal agreement is our stage where we'd ask for commitment. And so if you follow the process, the most important element of this is following the process. If we follow the stages of our consultation process, we've guided the patient through their own journey, then when we come to the proposal agreement stage, it's really simple. It feels natural. You feel as if the patient is ready. You'll notice their positive body language. They might even ask, what are the next steps? And when you follow the right structure, that tends to happen. But what we advise is that we instead of asking for commitment straight away, we ask permission to gain commitment. It might sound like a contradiction in terms, but it's a really simple way to do it. The example is that we would say something along the lines of, is there anything else we need to cover before we discuss the treatment proposal? And by asking in advance, have you got everything? If I make a treatment proposal, have you got everything you need to make a decision? Would be another example. If we went ahead with what we've discussed today, would you be ready to decide? And so what you're doing at that point is just checking with the patient that they are ready to make a commitment. So you're not actually asking for commitment in the instance, you're asking for permission to ask for commitment. And normally what happens is the patient will either say, yes, I think I'm ready, or at this point they will then say, well, actually, I'm still not sure about this, or I need to talk to my partner, or I need a bit more information. And the great thing about asking or making this commitment statement in this way is that it just surfaces anything that's going on in your patient's mind that they need to share with you. And then you can handle that and address it, and then simply move on to asking for commitment after that. It's a really useful, it's a nice way of doing it that takes the patient on the journey and gives you the confidence to ask without actually feeling as if you're asking. And then, of course, once you've asked for commitment, the patient says yes, then it's about making sure that we're really clear on all of the relevant details and remembering this is part of that experience for the patient. So, sorry, let me go back. Explaining the treatment pathway, the number of visits and the duration of the visits, the preparation before and after treatment that the patient needs to take, the pricing and the value that they get for that price. Really important that we include both. Payment options where that's appropriate and terms of those payment options for patients, appointment terms, what happens in reschedule notices, charges if they're breached, that kind of thing. And then just check that that meets the patient's expectations, because this is a perfect time to do it when the patient is in that position where they've agreed to commitment and next steps. And the final thing is to just think about with patients that enthusiasm. When in these final stages, we're as consumers, as buyers of services, whether we're patients, customers, we tend to find that we're enthusiastic in the moment, and then over time that enthusiasm wanes. And the phrase is it has a half-life. And really what we have to do is help people to make the right commitment when they're in the right frame of mind, because I'm sure you've experienced it where you've gone through a buying process or a process with a solution you were looking to buy, and you either didn't make the decision at the time, and then it just slips off your radar, and before you know it, you've forgotten about it. And actually, very often people have remorse about not having made the decision in the moment. So our responsibility to help them make those decisions is really important, because we don't want people to have that remorse that I should have made that commitment to myself, I should have prioritized that treatment and that improvement in my own oral health. Okay, so there's a few other things I want to cover. Before I do, that's the kind of key principles for the content this evening. I'd love to hear your biggest takeaways. I'm going to give you a moment just to think about, from what we've covered so far, there will have been insights that you gained as we talked through the different elements of those three particular stages. I'd love to hear what your key insights and your key elements or takeaways are from this evening. If you get a moment to just pick maybe one or two things, and if you could enter them into the chat, I'd love to read some out. And very often, as you're typing away, very often what we find is that by each of you sharing something that was an insight for you or a key action, that kind of consolidates your thinking on it, but it also helps other people to start to think about their own key actions. So I'd love to hear from your perspective from this evening, what are your kind of key actions? What are the one or two things that you think are going to be useful for you in practice to help you kickstart growth in 2023 and improve your patient consultations? There may even be elements of this evening's webinar that you think, yes, actually, I need to update my practice team, or I need to share that with key people in the practice, just so that we're all taking a similar, consistent approach to consultations. So I'll just give you a moment to put those in the meeting chat, if you would. I'd love to hear your insights from this evening so far. And I'd also like to talk to you. Very often people will say after that, well, this has been a useful introduction. If we wanted to go deeper into the topic, where would we go next? So I talked about a lot of the programs we do with kind of corporations, with larger teams. As we go into 2023, we are have built, I should say, an open practice growth academy. So we're really trying to open up the opportunity for individual dentists, principals, partners, associates, therapists, hygienists to join us for an open practice growth academy where we can kind of share the experience with a wider audience. And we're doing that through our Practice Growth Academy program, which starts in January. It really is about trying to kind of zero in on the consultation as a platform for growth in the practice, really helping with the conversation with patients to improve the quality of that conversation and help people to really start to be more consistent in the approach they take with communicating with patients. And we've got these 2 days that we're running the program on. We'll be in Cambridgeshire. It's a hotel called White Boston Lakes. And the first date, if anybody's interested, is the 27th and 28th of January. That's a Friday and a Saturday, so for 2 days together. We'll have around 20 people in the room, 20 to 30, depending on the numbers. But we really are looking at kind of this group coaching approach. So we'll do some training as part of the program. We have a really useful electronic workbook, and then we really look to kind of help the whole group to start to implement more effectively. And throughout the 2 days, we'll cover the content, but then we have 2 additional group coaching sessions that help with implementation, help with kind of providing support beyond just our 2 days together. So it starts with our patient experience scorecard, which I talked about earlier, where we get this personal development report and key recommendations. We then have a 2-day training and coaching workshops. And one of the things that we found is really useful is to invite people to work in accountability partners. So really start to think coming into the program about their own accountability to make and implement the changes that they wanted to make as part of the program. And that's been really useful in our corporate programs. So we're bringing that to our open programs. And if somebody's coming from a practice with another person, then that becomes their accountability partner. But if you come on your own, then actually we'll assign you to someone else that's on their own from a practice, just to provide you with support and accountability through our kind of workshop program. We issue copies of our Inspire, Consult, Sell book, and we have the online program. So once people have been through the full 2 days, we have an online program that has all of the content available in 10 to 15-minute video chunks. So you can go back and revisit any of the content at any time, which we found is particularly useful. We use this electronic toolkit to help capture your plans, start to really think about the consultation and the key elements of it, and how you start to document that, ready to implement in practice. We have reminder cards as well for the cycle. And then we follow up with 2 90-minute coaching web classes. So group coaching for everybody that's attended, so that we can support you to make sure that you've got one, the support to implement effectively in practice, but 2, then if there are challenges, if you find that some of the principles aren't working as effectively as you'd like, then we can coach you and help you to see, you know, the kind of changes that you want to make going forward beyond just the 2 days. And then we're looking beyond our Practice Growth Academy for consultations. We're looking at leadership development, and in particular, we've got this coaching leaders mastermind group that will continue beyond that. So lots of kind of options for people as we start to roll these out into 2023. If you would like to start with the patient experience scorecard, if you haven't taken it already, the link is on this slide. As I say, I'll send the slides through to you with the link. You will get, it's completely free of charge. It takes about 10 minutes to complete, and it starts to give you some insights around where you could focus to improve your consultations and, of course, practice growth for this year and beyond. We've got our toolkit, which I talked about, which is a really nice interactive document that we use to kind of map and document the changes through the program. It's been really useful. And it also means that we can share that across different teams. So if you've created a toolkit, or if you've created a document that really works for you, sharing that across your practice team is really useful. So I've talked about the Practice Growth Academy. It's a 2-day workshop, Why Boston Lakes Hotel, plus the 2 90-minute group coaching sessions. We are about 20 places at the moment. We have to limit at 30, but we are also running the program in March as well. So if you don't get into January, you are welcome to join us in March as well. It's Friday the 17th and 18th of March. Registration is open, so please feel free to contact me. If you would like to book a quick conversation, a one-to-one call, then there is a link here to my diary as well, so you're able to book a catch-up call if that's more useful or more suitable for you. Okay, final couple of things. I'd love to share with you some of the elements of the business at Focus Growth, some of the things that we do. So our mission, we're on a mission to bring world-class business best practice to our clients in dentistry. Having worked in and outside of dentistry, there are things we've learned over the years that we find really effective in the dental marketplace. And we really want to work with our clients to become market leaders so that they can make a more positive impact in their communities and beyond that, even in the world. And one of the ways that we do that, we have these 5 values that we work to as a team in Focus Growth. And you'll see they spell out the word focus. So the first is about being a force for good and really trying to think about how we positively impact our own local communities and marketplaces. We talk about ownership, and how ownership really helps us to make a greater commitment and responsibility to our customers to deliver what they really need from us. We talk about being client-centered and recognizing that, very much like practices don't exist without patients, our business doesn't exist without clients. So putting the client at the center of everything we do is vital for us and our future success. We talk about unlimited potential and recognizing sometimes we have to help our clients and their teams recognize their own potential, because very often people have greater potential than they realize. So we really try and make that inherent within all of our programs and coaching. And this final lesson is really important for us, this succeed or learn. So really starting to reimagine challenges, reimagine failure as actually it's either success, or if we don't succeed first time, then we take the lessons, we learn from it, and then we're able to go again much more effectively the second time round or third time round. I'm a slow learner, so sometimes fifth time round. And the force for good element is really important to us. We are strong advocates for the United Nations Global Goals. I'm sure many of you will have seen these, but 17 goals to improve life on planet Earth. And what the UN Global Goals Committee recommend is that you pick a goal that is particularly important for your business or particularly resonates with your business, and then you become advocates for it. And so we've chosen goal 8, decent work and economic growth, really trying to help our clients to grow in the marketplace. We really think we can make a difference here. We're also proud members of the 1% Pledge, which is pledging 1% of time and resources to worthwhile causes. And one of the ways that I do that personally is that I lead this mental health walking group called Walk and Talk for Men in Cambridgeshire. I've been running it for a couple of years now, and you'll see that we started out with a really small group a couple of years ago, and this is the picture from the walk that we ran on Sunday this week. We literally opened it up as a family walk, so moved it from a men's walk to a family walk, and we had 46 people join us and 8 dogs, believe it or not. And over the last couple of years, I've been running this group voluntarily. I've since had a couple of partners join me to run it now, because we've inspired quite a lot of engagement from our local community. And I have to say, it's been one of the most rewarding things I've done probably in my career, actually, even though it's not strictly work related. And whilst my business doesn't tend to be local from my community, it tends to be national from a lot of my dental clients. One of the things that it has triggered in me in terms of thinking is, from a local practice perspective, to really start to connect with your community, to start to do things, to be involved in a way that really does make a difference to local people, can really have, not only can it be rewarding, but it can really be beneficial for you, for them, and for your practice. So I hope that in a way starts to get you thinking about perhaps initiatives you could engage your own teams, your own patient base, your own networks and communities in supporting as you think about 2023 and some of the goals, not only within the practice, perhaps even beyond the practice. Okay, so I hope that final piece also gives you perhaps a little more to think about in terms of how you could perhaps make a positive impact. And if I've inspired you to think about that, I'd be absolutely delighted. If anybody would like to connect with me, if you're not already connected with me, please feel free to contact me. My email is on the slide here. The website for our business is focusforgrowth.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect with me, then you can get to all of my channels either through scanning this Linktree badge here or through this link here, Linktree/Justin Lee. So feel free to connect with me. I'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to sign up, many of you may already be signed up to our newsletter. We send a weekly inspiring email where we just share some of the work that we do with our clients. If you'd like to sign up for that, then feel free. You can click this link here. But otherwise, if you'd like to make contact with me, do genuinely. I'm very open to feedback and to people connecting with me. So thank you. I will come to questions in a minute. I've got a message in the chat. Thank you for the message. So key takeaway from this evening, trying to focus on the patient's goals. So understanding the patient. Yeah, thank you. And being concise in what I say, less waffling. Thank you. Thank you. And then thanks for a great lecture. I appreciate it. I love that. Some good self-awareness there, right? So self-awareness is the first step to change. No awareness, no change. So thank you. That's great to hear. Okay, I'm going to, so that's the formal content for this evening concluded. So I'd love to invite you to come off mute if you'd like to, come onto camera if you'd like to. Let me stop sharing my screen. And if you have, I'd love to hear your questions, comments, or feedback. Who would like to start with a question? You may find yourself on mute, so you might have to, if you have got a question, you may have to just unmute yourself first. So who would like to start us off with a question? You're very quiet this evening, everybody. I will take silence as consent if you've had enough. We are at 4 minutes to 8. So if you prefer to put a question in the chat, feel free to do that. I know not everybody likes to come on to ask questions in an audience, but if you would like to ask a question, please do. If you'd like to ask it in the chat, please feel free to do that. I'd love to hear from you. I get lots of questions. One that comes up very often is, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Angela, thanks very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Very happy to talk to you and Dev offline. Thank you very much. Susie, thank you. Lovely. Thanks, Angela. Appreciate it. So one of the other key elements, just before we finish, so we talked this evening about consultations. The second element we talk about is kind of practice goals and leadership. And I would say the other thing to remember is the importance of setting goals for the practice team. So making sure that the team are really engaged and enrolled in the goals for the practice. And that's a really big component of how you start to make a shift in the growth trajectory and a shift in the way that you think about the practice. So spending some time working through the goals for the practice and thinking about how do you enroll the team in that so that everybody starts to progress and move the practice towards those goals that you're looking to achieve. Okay, so we are at 2 minutes to 8. I'm going to wrap up unless anybody has any questions. I'll just give you a final moment. If anybody would like to come off mute and ask a question, you are very welcome to do so. But I do appreciate that we are at 2 minutes to 8. So if you've had enough, I won't take it personally, and I will look forward to seeing you all again in the future. So have a great evening, everybody. And thank you all so much for attending. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing from you in the future. Take care, everyone. I'll circulate the slides tomorrow. And if you'd like to contact me, then feel free to do so. Please do. Have a great evening, everybody. And look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.